I'm gonna push the second story, you guys hold here. Ready? Go. Hat, hat, hat.
Hey guys, this is Z-House here, and today I'm going to talk to you about possibly the best investment I have made for my new GoPro setup thus far. The testing that I've done with it thus far has been pretty limited and pretty brief, but honestly I feel like I've done enough testing to heartily recommend this option over any of the other GoPro NVG mount options that I've seen anywhere. It's just that much better at doing what it does than really anything else on the market. So if you're like me and you recently got a GoPro, you're probably looking for a good way to mount it to your helmet, and you're probably thinking, oh, well, if I've got a helmet with an NVG shroud, then I might as well make use of that NVG shroud and just be able to put my GoPro on there. There are several options on the market for GoPro NVG shroud mounts. Many of them are something like this, and it's just a basic GoPro mount that just fits into the NVG shroud in one way or another. This is the, I believe it's called the Hero GoPro NVG mount. Well, the problem you get with some of these mounts, including this one, is that when you put it in, it fits, but it wobbles quite a bit, which is frankly a pain in the ass, even on this real spec NVG shroud, a Wilcox shroud on my Team Wendy X-Fill LTP, you get a lot of wobble, even though this is the tighter shroud. And then the other problem is the GoPro sticks up like a satellite dish and has no point to index, and you can very easily knock it around. I decided before even running this in game that due to the wobble and the indexing issues, I was just gonna keep this as a backup and basically a last resort, because shortly thereafter, I saw the BrainExploder GoPro NVG mount. And let me tell you guys something, this is probably the only GoPro NVG mount on the market. If you shop and compare, this is really the only one that is worth its salt. It's made by a guy, Mr. BrainExploder himself, who actually uses the system and actually wanted to create something that would be sturdy, that would index properly, and that would fit the widest variety of NVG shrouds. And he did that with this 3D printed creation manufactured by Shapeways and, well, designed by BrainExploder. So as you can see on my Team Wendy X-Fill LTP, it mounts perfectly. There is no wobble in any way. This mount is rock solid and it indexes quite well right against the front of the helmet. So if you hit this camera against something, it's gonna go hit the front of the helmet and it's still gonna be at the proper angle for recording. Really, that's the biggest sell of this mount, is that it indexes properly and it doesn't wobble. If you need an NVG mount that does anything other than that, well, you need to look elsewhere, because apparently you want a mount that wobbles and you want a mount that has no indexing point. In terms of the quality of this mount, I mean, the material itself is very smooth in terms of finishing. Mine's starting to get a few dings here and there just from transportation, storage, and gameplay, but in general, the mount seems very solid. This isn't as chintzy as you would expect many 3D printed products to be. I know that some people, myself included, have had some doubts over the strength of 3D printed materials, but apparently Shapeways has nailed it, because this stuff is pretty strong. The one thing that I will say is very slightly worrisome is if you pull up on the mount, like so, you can start to get some shifting where the weakest point of the mount is the spring. The spring is an integrated piece of the mount, and if you start lifting, you'll get some shifting there. It's not a problem. It goes right back in just fine, and it seems to stay fine, but I figured I would mention it, so if for some reason you're expecting to have an upward impact on your mount a very severe upward impact, you might break that spring. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm not thinking it's the type of thing that's really liable to happen, but it's something that is worth mentioning. The other thing about this mount that is a little bit tricky, and this might be just because it's on my real NVG shroud on my Team Wendy, which is a Wilcox. This guy is very, very tricky to get in and out. It's very stiff with the spring, which, as I said, is integrated right. All right, so I've taken off the camera and I have turned the helmet sideways so the lighting will be proper so that you can see what I'm talking about with that spring. It's an integrated piece of the mount, and it is really stiff and really tricky, at least on mine, on my helmet, to get off. It requires a really good bit of force to get it to disengage enough that you can pull it out. It's breaking in nicely. It's getting easier and easier every time, but that is something that is worth mentioning. Giving you a nice little close-up here of the mount itself. It does not include the GoPro hardware, as is mentioned by every other person who's talked about this mount ever. You have to cannibalize that from some other mount, preferably one of the lesser NVG mounts on the market that are garbage. This one's definitely the better option, as I've said. So sometimes what I do though with this piece of hardware, because that spring is so stiff, I will actually use the plastic bit here, and you can see a little bit of scarring on mine possibly where I've done this, and I will actually wedge that in and push up with it. So if you're creative and if you're willing to find alternative solutions to problems, it's not that big of a deal, but I figured I would mention it because it is stiff it was stiff when I first got mine, but it is breaking in nicely. These tabs on the back, I had to cut off for mine because it is a real Wilcox shroud. They're there in case you have a replica helmet. I have test fitted this mount with some replica helmets from some friends of mine and from some people at the field. This does fit replica mounts just fine, but it does wobble exactly where these mounts are missing. So these tabs are missing. So leave those tabs in if you have a replica, cut them off if you don't. So I guess that's really all there is to say. I mean, the quality of the mount is overall quite good. The durability should be quite good. The material seems very sturdy. Another reviewer mentioned that you shouldn't over tighten the screw here while there's nothing in this actual mount because these pieces will start to bend. And they are right. If you over tighten it, you will start seeing that. I mean, you might even be able to see that now. So make sure you don't over tighten this. Make sure that you don't pull up on it too hard, and make sure you're willing to work with the stiffness of the spring until it breaks in. But I mean, once you get past any of those quirks, as I said, this is the only NVG mount on the market that I've seen that accomplishes what it accomplishes with such elegant simplicity and reliability. It's a really good mount. Is it worth the $30? It's worth the $30 and more. If they made an aluminum version, or if they made some other crazy version, I would pay $40 or $50 to have the aluminum and maybe a separated spring with a way to solve the anti-rotational. But for the iteration it is now and for the cost of it, it's a no-brainer. I mean, hopefully not because your brain exploded.